Hello everybody. In the previous videos, we talked about GDP, how powerful GDP is as an economic indicator, um, how we can calculate GDP using different approaches. Also, we had an important definition for GDP, or one thing that GDP is capable of measuring, and it is the value of production. And you can calculate the value of production by multiplying the price and quantity of all the goods and services that we produce in the economy. And here, basically, you going to use the market value of all the goods and services. Remember the definition of GDP. GDP measures the market value of all the final goods and services that we produce within our border in a given time period, right? There is a problem with using this price or the market value. And if you look at the GDP from one year to another, you cannot really look at those numbers and say anything about the standard of living. So let's say GDP in 2020 is 100 billion dollar, and then GDP in 2019 is, let's say, 98 billion dollar. Okay, you cannot really look at these two numbers, 198, and say, okay, the GDP here in 2020 was bigger than GDP in 2019. So definitely people had higher standard of living in 2020. The value of production was higher. You can't really look at these two numbers and say that. Why? Because we are using the market values, and we are using how much we produced over time, right? So what if the GDP in 2020 is bigger than 2019 because of this component, because of the prices? What if the quantity went down in 2020, but everything was more expensive in 2020? Then the result will be definitely higher GDP in 2020. So using the market value causes a problem for us. That's why we try to use real GDP here whenever we talk about the standard of living. In real GDP, we try to take care of this market value, this price. We try to keep the price fixed and just see how much output we produce from one year to another. So if the real GDP in 2020 is greater than real GDP in 2019, then I can claim that for sure the standard of living in 2020 was higher than 2019. Why? Because when I calculate real GDP in 2020, I am going to focus on how much output I produced in 2020. And I'm going to keep the prices fixed, and I'm just going to look at my quantity in 2020, and then I'm going to compare it with how much output was produced in 2019. And again, I'm keeping the price fixed in 2020. What I mean by keeping the price fixed, by definition, economists pick a year that is called base year. In the base year, they basically come up with a list of different goods and services that were produced in the base year. Base year right now is 2015. So they have the price of, let's say, food, drinks, housing, healthcare, education. So they have all the different prices. They keep all the prices fixed when they're calculating the real GDP at the base year prices, 2015, because again, they want to take out the inflation rate. They are just focused on how much we produce, because that's how we define GDP, right? The value of final goods and services that we produce. So if the real GDP in 2020 is greater than real GDP in 2019, it means that actually we produce more output. People enjoyed having more production, more goods and services in the economy, and we enjoyed higher standard of living. So that's how we calculate real GDP. So real GDP is prices in the base year, which is fixed, times the amount of output that we produce in that year. Okay, same thing here for 2019. Now let's talk about nominal GDP. So we only use real GDP if we want to talk about the standard of living. We do not use nominal GDP. Let's see why. Nominal GDP, unlike real GDP, has inflation inside. So if we want to calculate the nominal GDP in 2020, I am going to multiply the prices of all the goods and services that we produced in 2020, and then I'm going to multiply it by the quantity of these goods and services. So going back to this example, when I'm talking about the GDP in 2020, GDP in 2019, I'm basically talking about the nominal GDP here, okay? So if we had inflation, so this component actually went up, right? That's not a good thing. If we had higher prices, it means that our purchasing power of money actually went down over time. Everything is more expensive, so to purchase the same amount of goods and services, we have to pay more money. So higher inflation rate or higher prices means lower standard of living. And of course, the nominal GDP can go up also if we produce more output. But which one actually is showing what happened to the nominal GDP, we really don't know. That's why we use real GDP. We fix the prices, we eliminate this inflation that we have here, and we're focused on how much output was produced in 2020. Okay, so we never ever use nominal GDP when we're talking about the standard of living because we have inflation rate inside. Another important thing about real GDP and nominal GDP is, as you can see here, real GDP increases only when quantity is increasing, okay? Because the price is fixed at the base year prices. But nominal GDP can go up because of the price or because of the quantity, okay? You might ask, okay, why do we even need nominal GDP? We really need nominal GDP because there's another way that you can also calculate the real GDP, and is this formula. If you divide the nominal GDP or NGDP by the price index, that we will talk more in chapter 9 about it, you can calculate your real GDP. But just in short, price index or CPI, consumer price index to be more exact, is the average prices of goods and services that consumers basically pay for a basket of goods and services. Again, basket of goods and services is nothing but the list of different goods and services that people buy: education, food, the rent they pay, the mortgage they pay, the price that they pay for the apples and oranges they buy, okay? Anything, just you name it, it will be in the basket of goods and services. Then we take the average of the prices of all these goods and services that consumers purchase, and then we can calculate the price index, okay? There's a formula if you look at the notes that I put there for the price index. You can look at it. It's the price of the basket of goods and services in the current year divided by the price of the very same basket in the base year, and then you multiply it by 100. We're going to talk about it in chapter 9 again when we define CPI, consumer price index. But if you're just wondering why we need nominal GDP, this is a good reason for knowing about nominal GDP, okay? So make sure you know how to calculate nominal GDP and real GDP, the concept of real GDP, nominal GDP. Look at the lecture notes. I put some definitions for you for both nominal GDP and real GDP. Thank you.